happening, everybody? Cheers from TK. This is TK and Drinks, and we are coming to you tonight on a Wednesday with an Inside the Mead Makers studio, where we explore the world of mead making, talk to mead makers from around the world, and catch a buzz on some of the best meads around. Tonight we have the pleasure of being joined by hopefully a trio of gentlemen, one of them being Mr. Ken Schramm, one of them being Dr. Garth Cambray of Makana Meadery in South Africa, and hopefully Mr. Daniel Ball, who's with Forest Friends Limited out of Zambia, and they're the producers of the Zambezi Gold honey. So hopefully we can get them all on board. Appreciate. Oh, let's see, we got Dr. Garth available right there. Mr. Complete Mead Maker. So hopefully this gets popping off. Appreciate everybody popping in here, saying, hey, what's up, Crazy Stout Ladies? Appreciate you guys popping in. And, yes, Mr. Schramm, appreciate you popping in today.
Good to see you, Ty.
Oh. I took off my headphones and I couldn't hear anybody. There we go. Now I can hear you. I was like, why can't I hear anything? Excellent. And see here, I saw the request from Dr. Cambray. Here we go. And yes, let's try to, maybe I clicked them too close together. So, how have you been today, Mr. Schramm?
It's been an interesting day.
I'm sure it has. It's always an interesting day when springtime comes around on the orchard, I'm sure.
We went from 70 yesterday to 26 today.
Somebody else was complaining about that in that same area.
Yeah, it's been nuts. It's been nuts.
Uh-oh, it's saying that he is unable to join.
Uh-oh.
That's not awesome. Still says he's following me, says he's followed all the proper procedures. I wonder if it's cross-continent things. But I've had people from Europe and other parts of the world on before, so I'm not quite sure what the headache would be. But it unfortunately is Instagram, and they are a fickle beast.
Yep.
So until we can get him on there, and hopefully he does get to pop in, because I'm dying to talk to him about this whole Forest Friends Limited program and everything they've got going on there. Maybe you were the one who put me onto them, so hopefully you can give me a little more background on them than I already know.
Well, I can tell you a little. I
Sure.
can tell you if I can just fill in some time, because I'm not gonna jump on there.
Yeah, sure, absolutely.
But I mean, Garth is the person who introduced me to a number of things in mead making that I'd never been familiar with. He does a continuous fermentation process.
Right.
And his continuous fermentation process. Yay.
There we go.
Did that work?
Yes, we've got you on there now. Thank you for joining us.
Fantastic. A bit early in the morning over here.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, for anybody who doesn't know, it's about 5 o'clock in the morning over there in South Africa. So we appreciate you sharing your time with us today. This is a rare treat.
Great to be here. Yeah, good to meet you, Ty, and great to see you again, Ken.
Yes, you.
Oh yeah,
too, Garth.
Yeah. Pleasure to meet you, sir.
Cheers. My empty glass from last night, so I can go cheers with that.
Cheers. Yeah, there we go. Glass. Yes.
Ty, is that the same? Almost. No, yours is nicer. Okay, I'll hide mine away.
Well, I appreciate you, like I said, giving us some of your time today. I'm really excited to get to speak with you. Ken had reached out to me a little while ago about the Forest Friends Limited brand and their product, the Zambezi Gold Honey. He thought it would be a phenomenal product to, share with the world, as many more people, get them as much exposure as possible, and you via their vehicle. So if you could go ahead and give us a little introduction about yourself, and then pop into what you can tell us about Forest Friends, and we'll get this thing started.
Look, I mean, I started off making mead, and I developed a way of making it quite fast, using a continuous fermentation based on the traditional methods that the the Khoi and Xhosa people in this area of Southern Africa use. And so I started a meadery optimistically hoping to create thousands and thousands of jobs and all sorts of good social things. And, running a beekeeping operation and a meadery proved to be quite challenging. And somewhere along this process, I got a call from a chap from Zambia who said he was going to be visiting the Eastern Cape and wanted to visit me. So I met Dan. And, then I was struggling to actually get enough honey. And Dan said to me, he said, "Oh, I'll send a ton of my stuff down. You can experiment with it. Just pay the transport, pay me when you can sell it." And so we got a ton of Dan's organic woodland honey, which is from a huge beekeeping project that he runs in the northwest province of Zambia.
Yeah.
And it was quite an unusual type of honey because it's rich. It's not the honey that people are used to. It's probably closest to buckwheat would be the explanation I'd give, comparing it to a Western honey.
Sure. And
we just found it made great mead. So I think the first time I met Ken actually was with the first batch of mead that I'd made with that. It was 2005 or 2006, I think, in Colorado. Yeah.
Wow. So you've been making mead with you've been dealing with or making mead with these same people's honey, the same honey from the same project for almost 20 years now.
I think more than that, yeah.
Oh wow, more than 20 years.
Yeah, no, I think we started making mead, I think Dan and I have been, working together on various projects for about 21 years, I think, yeah.
Holy cow, that's phenomenal. And I was doing a little background research on them because I've had a dark Miambo honey before from a different provider, but this one is also a Miambo honey, but it's a much lighter Miambo honey. Is that pretty much the standard that you get from the Zambia region? Is these Miambo honeys because of the abundance of the Miambo tree?
That is it. Yes, I'm impressed that you actually know about Miambo honey because it is quite an unusual honey globally. There is great variation in the color depending on how it was processed. You must remember this is a full comb honey. It's not a spun honey. So if you're comparing the Miambo honey that Forest Fruits produce, that Dan and his team produce, to some of the other ones that might be available, the extent to which people have basically crunched the comb and maybe heat involved would influence the color. So with the forest fruits process, it's quite a low temperature, basically ambient temperature, which in the Northwest Province is pretty hot. I mean, it's over 100 in Fahrenheit, 37 Celsius a lot of the time. So it's not a cool environment, but the processing of the honey is at approximately room temperature, whereas some people may go a little bit over and then you'll get a very dark honey. But Miambo honey should come out the comb about the color that you've got there. Yeah.
Okay. And I was reading that you say they spin it. So you're saying that they from what I read on the website, they stick it in some sort of centrifuge and spin it out of the comb, and I'm assuming flies out to the sides and gathers down at the bottom. What do they do with the leftover wax? I'm sure they use it for traditional purposes, making candles and other goods with it.
Look, the wax is processed in quite large tonnages and is pelletized, and that wax is sold because it's certified organic, which is very unusual. Most beeswax on earth is ridiculously toxic because of the medications people have to use to treat varroa, but African bees don't get the varroa mite. So the result is that it's basically pharmaceutical grade organic wax, and quite a lot is going to high-end cosmetic brands, skincare companies, and I just love it because you've literally got something that, I mean, look, Zambia is pretty far away from anywhere, and the Northwest Province is very far away from anywhere, and the fact that people in that area are able to access a global market, in this modern world is pretty amazing. I mean, those little communities in the forest are they're really cut off from the global world. Yeah.
And it's really cool that they found somebody who seems to be, and this is, I use the term fair trade, but I'm not sure if they're actually fair trade certified. But regardless, they found somebody who's willing to give them a fair cut for their money or for their product, as opposed to trying to take advantage of, third world country or different types of situations. So I'm a really huge proponent of everything that I've seen on their website as far as how they again process all the honey with the centrifuge, so they're not heating it up, how they support all their employees. They have an employee appreciation program. I can't remember quite what it's called, where if anybody who works for them wants to come up, start getting some sort of education or some sort of certification to help better themselves and to help, bring the brand, basically to a higher place. They encourage all that. And one of the really cool things I saw on there, and if you could explain a little more, because I'm sure you've seen them in person, is their unique hives that they make. They take these, from what I can tell, a piece of tree bark, and they make it into like a cylinder, and then cap off the ends with like round circular pieces of bark as well, and then like kind of thread or pierce a piece of wood through to kind of make this like cylindrical tube, and they put the hives inside that. Or the hive is created inside that?
Yeah, that is the traditional. I think in the US they used to call those bee gums.
Oh,
Long ago, that was a bee gum hive, and it was the old hive of humanity. You just used some hollow bark basically that you hung up in a tree, and it mimicked a hollow log.
gotcha,
And the bees love it. They're very healthy in there because that's their natural environment. When the guys rob
gotcha,
the hive, they'll open the end up and reach in and cut the combs out. But the density of beehives in that woodland is huge, and
sure,
it's quite a significant percentage are managed hives in these log systems, and a huge percentage are just wild hives that are rattling around. And I mean, it's almost excuse me.
yeah,
It's almost impossible to comprehend the number of beehives and how big that ecosystem is, because when we look at the map, Zambia looks like quite a small little country, but I mean the amount of forest and the number of bees in that forest, because these hives have to be hoisted up into the trees so that the honey badgers and
oh yeah,
various creatures don't get them. And I mean, you must remember that this is you know in parts of this region. I mean, if you were walking around in the forest and you bumped into an elephant, it wouldn't be because you're in a nature reserve. They're just wild animals wandering around. It
gotcha,
is the stereotype of Africa. Parts of that region have chimpanzees, the whole range of things. That it's a very remote part of the world. But the bees act as a tool that give people an incentive not to continue cutting the forest down and exporting it to China or something. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, I was very impressed, Garth, with the number of that are part of this collab. I mean, I think they're dealing with thousands at this point, yeah?
7,000 is, yeah, my understanding. And you must remember that if you look in the US, one person on some form of income is probably maybe supporting 1.5 people. I think we got Dan is joined. Fantastic.
yeah,
Yeah, in rural Africa, your ratio is much higher. You're looking at per person that is employed by or is gaining an income. You're probably looking at about 10 dependents. So 7,000 beekeepers that's a small city.
yeah.
70,000 people.
No kidding.
Oh, there's
There we
Dan.
go.
Hi.
Thank you for
Sorry, I'm
joining
not
us
very
today,
up
Mr.
to
Ball.
date.
Appreciate you.
No, that's great. It's just Dan. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh,
Great.
yeah. Thank you for. Yeah,
Here's
we're
some good.
yes. So yeah, Garth was just giving us a background on Forest Friends Limited and giving us a quick once over on Miambo honey that you guys are supplying that the Zambezi Gold. Uh, Go ahead and introduce yourself a little bit and tell us how you got linked up with these beekeepers there in Central Africa.
Well, I'm Canadian, but I'm actually third generation of my family that's lived grown up and lived in Zambia. My grandfather came to Zambia as a medical missionary doctor, I think back in the 40s. So grew up in rural Zambia, and it's home, and grew up with a couple generations of missionaries who were pretty good at education and health and proselytizing, but not that great at economic development or offering income generating opportunities. And the good book says man cannot live by bread alone, but you got to have some bread once in a while. And I kind of looked at this. I looked at this as a young guy growing up, and eventually I morphed from missionary to economic development planner to business person. And the beekeepers came to me. I grew up in rural Zambia, and I'd been working there, and they came to me and said, "Hey, can you help me find a market?" So I started. I didn't know too much about honey, but I started and sort of did it bass backwards, and bought 30 tons and decided to look for a market.
That's quite the investment, 30 tons of honey.
Yeah. So, well, actually, we started with 5 tons and 100 beekeepers. And then I quickly, without a market, went to 30 tons. And yeah, 25 years later, it's 7,000 beekeepers. And this year we produced 1,400 tons, and most of it's exported. Yeah.
Holy
And
cow.
95% of it is certified organic as well. So yeah, so
Yeah, that's
because beekeeping in Zambia is a forest activity. It's not an agricultural activity. It's all from the indigenous rainforests and savanna woodlands. So
yeah.
it's an extremely healthy honey. The level of biodiversity is amazing. And Garth and his team have just finished doing some honey research on the honey, and looking at the compounds that are found, and you're finding all sorts of really interesting stuff in there.
Nice.
So that's sort of the background. Honey constitutes about 70% of our village. You know, beekeepers are probably the poorest of the rural poor, and they make below $2 a day, and it constitutes 70% of their cash income for the year. So it's incredibly important for them, and it's a once a year harvest for them. So yeah, it's pretty important economic activity.
Very cool. I mean, that's awesome that you're able to sustain the industry is able to sustain themselves on, you know, such little, and being able to keep up with something that is a regenerative type of process. So they're, you know, able to continue to do it. They're not harming the forest and everything. So I'm here for all of that. Ken, have you used any of the honey in any of Schramm's mead, or certainly when you were doing home brewing and stuff?
I have not used any of the Zambezi Gold honey yet. I've only had a handful of pounds of it, and in fact, you got one of them. So I haven't.
Yeah, thank you very kindly.
Enough quantity to try some piloting, but it does to me present a real interesting challenge in terms of the pilot. I've thought about how it is a very throaty and honey, and it will take probably some experimentation with different yeast cultures that I'm going to have to take a crack at with this.
Oh yeah.
To figure out which fermentation type will work. Is this something that should be cold fermented? Is this something that needs to be warm fermented? And then which yeast style will work and create the most attractive characteristics, both from the honey, from the de novo stuff. I'm also really interested in the fact that, I mean, it's a really earthy honey, and I wonder if there may not be some techniques that might be used with this, because it's got a very aggressive aromatic profile. I have noticed that it tends to change as I've worked with, and I did some blending with this with some whiskeys too, to see if there might be a really attractive combination that could be done there for use in this with this honey in a liqueur. Yes. And I think there is. I got mixed reviews that I sent it to. One of them rated it as one of the top samples that I gave them, and some other people were not as fond of it. And I'm curious to know if there are ways that warming of the honey, or mild warming, not warming, or if there are things like I mean, I've known, and this is interesting because right now I'm drinking a black heart, and it has a tremendous amount of acidity, and I've wondered about doing with the black heart. I've wondered about doing malolactic fermentation to soften some of that incredible acidity from the black raspberries. And I'm also to know if there might be some malolactic or other bacterial cultures that could be used with this honey to transform it in a way positive and
I think I get what you're saying. Just transform it into something greater than what it already is. Be able to play to the characteristics and toy with them, and be able to pull unique traits and characteristics out and through different processes and stuff. I'm here for it.
And that's kind of piloting process when we get a new fruit or a new honey. I'd like to.
Well, Ken, that's sorry, I'm not jumping in, but a very interesting thing to bear in mind is fermentation temperature. So with if you imagine the supply chain from flower to beehive in the Miambo woodlands, it's pretty hot the whole way. The temperature in that part of the world just doesn't really get cold. So the type of microbes that are living in that honey are generally things that will thrive at human body temperature. Okay. So if you are looking for a healthy source of very beneficial microbes, you must remember that humans have been rattling around in that part of Zambia for 2 million odd years and have been gathering honey. So honey has always been a very important part of the human microbiome as a source of microbes that's actually keeping you healthy. So doing warm temperature mead fermentations, and I ferment mead with African honey at 34, 35 degrees Celsius. So that's close to 100 Fahrenheit. Yeah. And conventional brewing logic tells you that that's insane. That you shouldn't be brewing hotter than 24. But with the Miambo woodland honeys, a hot ferment gives you a lovely mead, as long as you use the right yeast. But there are natural yeasts in that honey that are very suited to high temperature fermentation.
Yeah. Can you talk about the yeast and how you source your yeast for your fermentation, Garth?
Well, look, I mean, Dan, myself, Bob, and Kings. That we were the team that looked at sourcing honey, and we actually used wax comb from the extraction process that Dan brought down in the big truck to Lusaka, and we extracted just a mixture of honeycomb and water, and eventually the natural yeast just grew up. Dan, if I remember correctly, that the drum, we kept it at the door of your kitchen, correct?
Yeah.
It was a particularly hot spot because Dan's where Dan lives in Roma and Lusaka is got big trees everywhere. So to try and find a place where you can put a drum in the sun, you have to be quite careful. So obviously in the honey processing facility, we couldn't find a place, and we needed this to be really warm. Yeah. So we found a spot next to the door to his kitchen where we put the drum there and got nice and hot, and we got some good yeast that isolated out of that wax, and that's the yeast that we've basically used for producing. Dan, how many thousand liters of honey vinegar.
Yeah,
We
bit embarrassing. About 120,000, liters. Yeah.
Ooh.
So this was
So
intentional that we made honey vinegar, but the first step in that process is to make mead. And yeah, as with the fine balsamic vinegar, you have to start with a good wine to make a good vinegar.
Yep.
So we had to make good meads so that we could make good honey vinegar. Yeah.
That's awesome. I work at a place that makes vinegar right now, and we are actually just making a honey balsamic today. That it's crazy that you mentioned that. I haven't seen too many places doing that, and when I saw that on your website there, it threw me for a loop. But I think everybody should try it because it's definitely a unique product. Um, Dan, if people want to go ahead and get some of the Zambezi Gold, I saw a question in here from Makana Meadery. They're over in India, and they said they'd love to get a hold of your stuff. I know you guys do bulk sales, you guys do smaller volume sales. Let us know how all that works out.
yeah, well, I mean, our business is primarily bulk sales, although our brand of Zambezi Gold honey is sold in Zambia, Botswana, Namibia, South Africa, in the region. So there's a retail pack, which those bottles that you have, that's our retail product for the region. Yep. And then the rest of it is bulk sales by the container load. Though I have 265-gallon totes in a warehouse in Houston, Texas, right now. So I do have totes available. It's the first time, getting access to markets. It's really difficult if you're landlocked country, and then you've got to try and who wants to buy a container load? So we decided to put the totes into a 3PL warehouse in Houston and see whether we could break down shipments and make it a bit more accessible for people. But some of my buyers will buy a container load, 20, for the States, it's about 18.6 tons. And for the rest of the world, it's about 22 tons in a container load.
Okay.
And it comes in drums. So we ship to about 17, 18 different countries. The UK buys quite a bit. Norway and Sweden buy quite a bit. Historically, Belgium, Germany, and Netherlands. And of course, into the States, we've been selling not as regularly as Europe over our 25 history, but over the past few years, it's gone up quite a bit. So we've probably put in a few hundred tons into the States over the past few years, and seems, I think States is known for its innovation and swag, so we were thinking this might be something to try out. It does. I mean, I think Ken is right. If you taste or smell our honey, it has a woody, I think on the aromatic wheel, it's called a woody aroma, and a bit of a spicy taste, and a little bit of the aftertaste is a bit spicy. So it is, this is characteristic of honey that comes from forests, from natural forests. It tends to be stronger, robust, sort of a robust taste, a little bit of a black currant maybe in there. But I think Ken's right. I think it's would be a bit of an adventure to try and see what works. Well, I mean, we do a hot ferment. I actually have 10,000 liters of a mead right now that I'm drinking that is done with the natural yeast from the beehive. So this is what we're used to over here. I mean, for like every society has had a honey beer or a honey wine, and this is what we're used to. But I would agree that probably different yeasts will bring out different characteristics and worth experimenting with.
The thing I'm catching is a lot of I mean, I get a lot of dark fruit. I mean, your comment about currant is good. I also get like a dark but and yeah, certainly a good point. One of the beers of is I just smell it on its own. It's like a big, rich Belgian golden ale, or even more, like sink scent or something along those lines. How well a dark, no, not dark, but a warm fermented Belgian ales work with this.
Yeah, you're a little bit choppy there, Ken. I'm not quite sure what's going on.
Yeah, let me try and move the phone a little closer to me.
Oh.
I'm getting notes of like dark plum, dark Japanese plum. I get a lot of spice from this. I get cinnamon. I get nutmeg, mace notes. And what I wonder about is whether or not a dark Belgian, a yeast strain that would be used to ferment a dark Belgian Trappist or other warm fermented Belgian style would work with this, because it just seems like a natural match.
I've met a couple different guys who have made meads with it, and a lot of those guys are using it in the back sweetening of their dark fruit meads, so their cherry meads, their black currant meads, and it's adding a really unique zing and pop to those, and it's really playing on some of those more, or to say less played on characteristics in those fruits. I actually made a traditional out of mine, and I did a hot ferment on it with a Kvike yeast, and it was about 100 degrees, like you were saying, and I was highly impressed with it for being one of my first 10 meads that I've made, and it came out as a drinkable product with true characteristics to the honey profile. So I'm a huge fan of the Miambo honey, and especially this one, having had this compared to the other one. This is a much more phenomenal product. A lot of those characteristics that you were saying that are coming through did not come through quite as well as the other one. So cheers to you guys for the quality that you're putting into this.
Well, thanks. Yeah, thanks. I mean, we're quite excited with the level of biodiversity in the honey. That just makes it really, really interesting. And of course, the provenance of it in terms of where it comes from and the economic effect. I mean, I've had the privilege of doing this for 25 years, and I've watched the effects of, we pump about $1 million a year of purchases into the local village economies. And now in the rural economy, these remote economies, the people with money in the villages are the beekeepers. So that's also very meaningful. And I've had being an economic planner as well, I've had the privilege of watching the effect of what they call the multiplier effect of money, and how beekeepers have used it to enhance their livelihoods over 25 years. And that constantly raises hairs on the back of my neck, because it's chilling and like exciting to see what people have been able to do. So the economic impact is good. It's you obviously have to have a product that people want to buy, and we've managed to do that. But yeah, I'm excited. I'd be very excited to see what people come up with as they trial with various yeasts. It's already bringing ideas to me. But yeah, that's great. Yeah.
So, Dan, can you talk a little bit more about the environmental impact? I mean, how the beekeepers and their ability to continue to use the forest for revenue production without being destructive. How has that helped the Zambian the Zambian ecology?
Well, that's a really good question, and one that has, let's say, beekeepers anybody who's a beekeeper lives deep in remote rural forests, and they are the dwellers and the keepers of the land. And so there was a PhD thesis done on this in 2016. And also in the 70s, a German beekeeper came in, did a lot of research on on this type of thing as they were trying.
Oh no!
What's happened there? Did we lose?
Oh, please, just for a short period of time. This is like getting to the good stuff, and then everything cuts out.
Okay, that,
Are we paused?
yes.
Oh,
Can you hear me?
yeah, you're back.
We
Okay.
Yay!
At the German,
we lost you just after the comment about the German study.
Yeah.
So a German beekeeper came in and with a team, and they were trying to move honey production and beekeeping a little bit from, I mean, this tradition goes back 500 years. And so they were trying to look at a way to monetize this beyond just local consumption. And so some studies were done, and beekeepers are the ones who, they go into an area, they chop down a tree, and they'll take the bark or the log of that tree, hollow it out, make a cylinder, and they don't just make one hive, they make several hives. So a tree will make several hives, and then they put it 10 meters, 20, 30 feet up in a tree, because that's where our bees browse, is on the forest blossoms.
Yeah.
And they leave it there. There's nothing intensive about it. I mean, our hives produce an average of 8 kilos per hive. It's not very high, very much, but it's very healthy because there's no intensive farming of bees. So, and beekeepers, they'll go to an area, and if they do not have a tree that is the size, naturally, eventually you will use a tree, or you might find an area that doesn't have as many trees that are suitable. So they simply move on. And then 10 years later, they'll come back and see whether they've got anything. So there's a natural rhythm and system that exists. I think the popular approach amongst some of the younger colleagues here who like to promote their work with beekeepers is that, yes, they promote modern beekeeping in modern top bar hives or dead ant hives, and it saves the forest. Well, our beekeepers can't afford Langstroth, dead ant, or top bar hives. They just can't afford it. So it's a bit of a fallacy that, and they, the common criticism might be.
Oh boy. Yeah. Welcome to Instagram.
It is.
I think this is early morning.
Okay. It's deforestation from charcoal burning, and that's far more of a dangerous thing. But the beekeepers have a natural system for knowing what to use. You can't use small trees to make hives, and so there is a natural sort of benchmark for them.
Yeah, we lost you for a second there, but I think we got the gist of what you're saying. There was a question that had come back in here a little while ago. Said you were talking about how the honey was harvested from the wild hives. Can you elaborate on that a little bit further?
Yes, I mean they climb up the tree, create a small natural smoker from leaves and twigs. Use the smoke to blow into the hive. The hive is basically a cylinder. It's a cylinder of bark or log, and they have a little doorway that they've chopped into it, and they go in and they do a harvest, and they'll cut it out. We don't have frames in our traditional hives. It's sort of built like the bees used to build in a skep. They just build naturally. So it gets cut out and put in a bucket that we supply. We have about 40,000 buckets to cater to our beekeepers. And they put it in a bucket, and then so the way the system works is my staff are on motorbikes throughout the forest, and we train every year. We have our internal control systems, and then the beekeepers go together into the forest for 2 weeks. They'll harvest. They'll bring their buckets on their shoulders, on the bicycles, and they'll aggregate them at their village eventually. It's hard work, and they'll sleep out overnight, and they'll in the forest, and they'll do their harvest, put it in the buckets. But when they do, they cut out the comb. from the cylinder of beehive. There's no frames in there. It's naturally formed. Put it in the bucket, and then the buckets come to us. And in our factory, what we do is we manually decap, and then we put it into centrifuges. And we've actually had to buy and redesign equipment because nobody sells anything that will suit the African situation. So then we centrifuge it out and let it settle and put it into drums. But the harvesting is actually done. I mean, they climb up in the tree, or they'll lower it down to the ground and do the harvest on a rope from the ground. So, yeah, pretty basic.
And I'm
So
sure.
Dan, there was a question.
Go ahead,
I saw
Garth.
that came up. People asking if the honey is harvested with the brood, and remember we spoke about that. That you try to leave the brood in the hive so that the bees don't abscond.
Yeah, I mean, it's a two-way street. We train to leave the brood because there's continuity there. However, traditionally, it's the women and children who get the brood and eat it as a source of protein. Now, that's not done so much now, but historically, over the past 500 years, that's been a good source of protein in the village.
Oh, I would imagine so.
Our good beekeepers are leaving it, and the bees stay, and then produce again. So.
But on that topic, Dan, when we were doing our research on the honey vinegar, there's some really interesting research that has come up recently that actually suggests one of the key things that has allowed human beings to develop the brain size that we have is actually eating bee brood. Because if you imagine a lot of the world, be it the forests of Germany or the forests of Zambia, nutrients are pretty scarce. I mean, you weren't going to be able to eat a bear every day or eat some forest creature in Zambia, of which there are actually very few. The thing is, the things that you can catch in Zambia are probably going to kill you. So the honey actually represents a very safe source of nutrients in the form of energy. The brood represented a major source of lipids for building a human brain. So in the olden days, the magic of the beehive was exceptional. But the thing that we don't focus on, and this is really, really important, is that the bees have exactly the same temperature as us, 37 degrees. So the microbes that are living in the beehive are the microbes that we need to be the interface between us and the world that we're consuming. So bees are this absolute treasure trove of microbial biodiversity, and that again was why I stressed. I see the beverage that you're drinking is live. I can see there's sediment in there. Am I right? Yes, that's
Mine.
that's alive. It's
I
got
didn't
some,
filter it or anything. It was just how it was. Yeah.
and that's how it should be. That's what we're supposed to be doing every day, is consuming a live beverage. So we, be it live fermented milk, live honey, live, there's, so all of these things are tools for us to keep a healthy microbiome and a healthy brain. So that brood question has actually opened up a really important set of, and with I see we've got Sarana mentioning some things from India. Obviously, that's a whole new treasure chest that they have access to in India, is the unusual honeybees of India, which are also very special. Dosata, Apis cerana, Florea. All of those are also little treasure chests of microbes. And as mead makers, we are the people that give the gift of the microbiology of a honeybee hive to a human in a easily consumable form, because you cannot drink a liter of honey, but you can drink a liter of
Oh, that'd be a challenge.
You could probably drink it. It's going to have a bad effect. Once you convert it to alcohol, it's so much better for you.
Yeah, you might be diabetic by the end of that day. And just to know, I will be having an interview with Sarana Meads here coming up on March 8th, Friday, March 8th. So anybody who wants to join and speak with them, they obviously have a ton of questions. It's an Indian meadery and ran by a couple of doctors as well. So it's going to be a phenomenal interview. So I highly suggest anybody show up for that who wants to learn more about this Indian honey and all that type of stuff too.
So, Garth, can I ask you to repeat the story that you told when I met you in Colorado uh, a dozen years ago, um, about um, going into the forest and finding an actual mead tree?
Well, this is okay. I mean, you know, much like the history of the US, South Africa had a history with a NAM of sorts, which in our case was Namibia. So a lot of young men in the 80s used to get drafted into the army and get taken up to the forests of Angola, basically to fight a geopolitical event that is happening there. And we had a teacher who told us about how they were walking through these forests in Angola, and this their tracker, who was a San. So the San is the First Nation of Southern Africa. So this San tracker he stopped and he stared up this tree, and basically took his army, that tin hat that they wear, took this thing off, went straight up the tree, and started scooping into the tree, and there was a beehive that had been submerged by the spring rains and had fermented and turned naturally into mead. And I just always remembered hearing this story. And of course, Dan has backed up the fact that that sort of stuff happens from time to time in the Miambo woodlands. But Dan, it had something to do with elephants, right? And how they break the trees, or
Yeah, not that's not me. I don't think. Yeah.
oh,
No,
okay,
but
yeah.
go ahead.
No, okay, so I'm trying to work out then where I heard this from. But basically, in all your Central African woodlands, the trees are in a hurry to try and get away from elephant. So they go up because, if you close to the ground and you have branches close to the ground, the elephant's just going to break that branch off. So the trees are in an exceptional rush to get as high up as they possibly can. So they sort of grow, but then when they get high up, sometimes their branches will dangle a little bit down, and if the elephant can sort of grab onto that, it causes a crown crack in the tree. So that crown crack will then rot out and create a hole in the top of the tree. And when your rainy season comes, and of course in that whole region, it's pretty dry for a long time, and then it's very wet for a long time. So when that rain arrives, the trees typically produce a honey flow before the rainy season, because during the rainy season the rain will just knock all the flowers off the trees and the flowers will ferment. So the beehives are pretty full at the start of the rainy season, full of honey, and then the water can run down and actually just drown a beehive in a tree, and a mead forms naturally that way, especially in baobab trees. So Ken, that's the story was from my junior school teacher Ian Sutty, who, when he was up there, and when he heard that I was getting into mead, he said, "Oh, Cambers, I have to tell you about when I was in the army and we had this honey wine that came from Angola," and that was where that original story came from. Yeah.
The other thing I was hoping you could relate, Garth, is that you use a yeast that is obtained in your natural environment. Yes, I mean in your continuous fermentation process. Is there? I mean, are you still using a yeast that's obtained from your area, or are you just allowing the spontaneous fermentation of the yeast that's in the honey to occur?
Yeah, we just use a natural consortium of yeast, and you must remember that, I mean, the Miambo woodland, if each beehive is, it's Dan will have the figures in the number of tens of thousands of square miles of forest that are basically concentrated into that honey. So, if you imagine the bees are going out to flowers that have a dilute sugar solution in them, there's a lot of fermentation going on, if the air temperature is 100 degrees Fahrenheit. So that yeast biodiversity gets concentrated back to the hive. The yeast will often produce spores, or they'll just be inactivated. So it's really just a case of diluting that honey a little bit, getting the pH right, so the squeeze of lemon juice helps, and just letting the natural yeast come out. And within if you dilute it to an SG of 1.1, so 1,100 or 1,120, add a squeeze of lemon juice and put it in a dark corner, it will, the yeast will come out of the Miambo woodland honey. And they are interesting yeasts because they tend to favor high temperature fermentation. So, you know, the quick yeast, or whatever you want to call it, the turbo yeasts, that have these abilities to ferment without producing too many esters are the natural yeast that you actually tend to find in honey. We did a little bit of sequencing a couple of years ago, and we found that one of the strains of yeast that we actually picked up in our fermenter is widely marketed by a company called Angel Yeast as its high temperature yeast. And that yeast is just naturally available in honey, but it's commercially produced in China as a super yeast. And it's very similar to quick yeast and a hell of a lot cheaper. So if somebody did want to try and mimic without isolating their own yeast, a high temperature tolerant distillation yeast is probably the closest you'll get. But I would strongly recommend just trying to isolate the yeast from the honey, because it'll always be better than what you can buy. So, yeah.
My knee-jerk reaction was I hear turbo yeast and I instantly think, you know, distillation, and in my personal experience, turbo yeast isn't always associated with the highest quality. Like you're saying, no esters, a clean, you know, fermentation, clean fermentation. Most people are looking for those types of, you know, notes and esters and characteristics from their yeast. So it's interesting to learn that that's the more naturally occurring in the honey.
Just remember, if you're starting with a honey that has a lot of character, you don't need to add character. Often you have to subtract it. So with the Miambo woodland yeast, I've actually got a couple of bottles that are lying here that are from 2004. But the aging curve of a complex honey is very good. So when you've got a lot of complex organic materials in the honey, which is in the Miambo woodland honey, it ages exceptionally well.
Gotcha.
And it's multifloral, so there's always some funny chemical that can react and form an ester with something. And then, of course, the other very important thing is that sometimes there's an initial note to Miambo woodland honey that you think, how would that fit in a mead? But that actually bubbles off during the fermentation, and the end product is completely different. So, you know, what you start with, it looks like Dan's taking us into
the factory there.
This is quite an exceptional facility that they've produced in a really, really remote part of the world. It is quite an achievement.
Oh yeah. Here we go. Drums and drums and drums of honey.
That's mead.
Oh, that's all mead.
Yeah. That's the wild yeast that we multiply out, that we get from the beehives, and then we multiply it out, and eventually it goes into these food grade tanks that we use.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Were those about 3,000 gallon poly tanks?
These are 10,000 liter. Yeah. And
Very cool setup you guys have there.
And then what's sitting in Houston is the
two
IBC
75 ICB totes.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Now, is there anybody, do you know, that sources that down into smaller, like somebody who's like a co-packer or anything that buys it and does it into smaller bottles for U.S. consumption? Because I know you said that there was, you had these bottles for sale in the African and European markets.
Well, no, I think it certainly represents an opportunity at this point. But we don't have anything smaller yet.
Gotcha.
However, if there was interest, I could certainly have a couple of those IBCs decanted in Houston. I could get it to a co-packer and decant it out. So yeah, we'd be happy to do that. Just as a way of working with people to see,
Kind of
you know. Yeah, I mean, years ago, our honey was used by Dogfish Brewery, and they produced a stout with our honey. It was called Bitches Brew, and it got produced for a few years, and then we at that point the logistics of getting from Zambia to the States were just incredibly convoluted.
Right.
Also, New Belgium Beer used our honey for a little while, but then we really struggled with availability. So now we've got the logistics worked out and things a bit more solid. So yeah, so I think we'd be happy to work with people if there was interest to break something down. We could probably get something done. Yeah.
And the website to get a hold of you is Zambezi Gold, right? info@zambezigold.com.
That's right, and I also put my my own email on there, dball@zambezigold.com. Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, anybody out there who's wanting to buy some, some quantity of honey, reach out to Dan here, and he'll work with you the best they can to try to set up something. I would love for maybe some like homebrew clubs to get together and go in on, maybe a drum or something like that, or be able to get this product to a wider reach, because I think there's a real desire on the American market for cool, unique, crazy varietals of honey. And while it may not be quote unquote like a single varietal honey, it is probably one of the more unique types of honey I've had, both the dark and this lighter one. So I would love for this to flood the market, so to speak.
Yeah.
Well, I think if people are seriously interested in this and would like to have somebody at a bigger scale work to provide consumable quantities of it, putting out the message to somebody like Z Specialty or the World Honey Exchange to let them know that there is a market for this and that we're interested in this product might create some pull for this product for Dan and for Garth.
Yeah, I would love to see World Honey Exchange be able to get their stuff out of there. I know they have an air supply setup. They helicopter their stuff out of there, and they got to get it out of there with a quickness. So that I could imagine that would be beneficial.
Just in terms of the quickly now, we're just mentioning people wanting to weave an interesting story into their brewing. We've picked up some fascinating microbiology in this honey, and one of them is the presence of a fungus called Meniscus purpurea, which produces a lot of really beneficial compounds that, among other things, lower cholesterol.
Oh, wow.
And if somebody were to happen to be doing a beer project at lower alcohol, I think you would probably find that you'd get some of the benefit of that microbe actually growing through with beer, because obviously with a grain product, it will gain a bit of traction during the early stages of Wow. But we picked up quite high spore counts of Meniscus, which is just a truly exceptional microbe. That's like it's one of the holy grail microbes. But
yeah, that's wild. I and see, that's again the same types of things that lend to the American mead makers. They're looking for those unique, cool, I like to call them bragging points. Like you said, people are always wanting something, to add a cool story, a unique tale to tell with their mead and to weave into their fermentations, and that just adds to it all the more. I feel this is such a treat to have you guys on tonight, and I really hope that people out there take this seriously, and we can really get some more of this flowing around the States. I know it's kind of a rough time for mead makers right now, but I think this is an exceptional product at an exceptional time.
Thank you, Ty.
I'll leave you with the last great story for a mead maker. When I was a boy living in the bush, we would go hunting, and it's well known in much of Africa that when you're hunting, traditionally, when you've been hunting, if you're there's such a bird called the honey guide, the greater honey guide, and this bird, when you're hunting is associated not only with animals, but hunting for food. And the honey guide will literally lead you to where there's honey. And so even today, some of our village beekeepers who have their hives spread out throughout the forest, the honey guide will take them to their hives that actually have honey, because some don't. So it's not a domesticated bird. This is a wild genetic development. And so the honey guide will lead you to where there's honey. And then you harvest it, and it is incumbent on you to leave some honey or honeycomb for the honey guide to eat. And if you don't, the next time they will lead you to a wild animal or a snake that will attack you. That's our tradition, and that is actually true. I've met people who have been led to wild animals instead, and by a honey guide, because the previous hunter did not leave them any food. And that's still part of our tradition and part of our existence here on this great continent. So you smack that on a bottle of mead. Greater Honey Guide mead.
Oh, I'm here for it. I love that. Thank you so much, Dan, for joining us. Go ahead, Ken.
You bet.
Well, it's the indicatore. That's the name of the bird.
Oh,
Is it?
gotcha.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
No,
Yeah, of course, the indicator. Yeah.
yeah. No. I love that. That is a phenomenal story, and that would go great on a mead bottle. And one last question I did see earlier: is there any way anybody can get a mead made with this, either from you, Garth, over at Makana, or through you, Dan?
Yes, I mean, we have some mead here with a natural, made with the natural yeast. I saw a question about that. So we have some literage here, and I know that Garth also does quite a bit of work with mead makers on a consulting basis.
Yeah.
And can work with teams to get something going as well.
Gotcha.
So.
I think
So
there may be a small amount of Be United keep back some of their batches that they enjoyed, but I know that there was a small one of the method accidental meads that we made that Matthias and David Frost and the team at Be United have is made with the Miambo woodland at the moment. Yeah, that's
okay.
But generally it's become scarce. So I think the best would be to source it directly from the source.
And make it yourself. Yeah, I think it can be kind of hard to get a hold of some of those, especially when you start talking about international shipping and registrations and customs and all that stuff. You're best off just buying the honey and fermenting some of yourself, unless you can get to Africa. Then, make that a treat for yourself.
And we can certainly, for experimental batches, there's courier services and everything here. But to work out, we've actually shipped stuff, 20-liter bucket and a 7-liter bucket into the States when people have asked. So that's certainly possible. And actually to the rest of the world, it's not a problem. So
there you go. So anybody who's looking to, on that scale, reach out, info at Zambezi Gold or dball at zambezigold.com, and he will take care of you, all your questions, info. Again, thank you so much for joining me today, Dan, Dr. Garth, Mr. Schramm, Ken. You guys are all awesome, and this was phenomenal. This is the types of interviews that I've dreamed about hosting when I started doing this thing. So thank you for helping me achieve something that I've been trying to achieve.
Been great chatting.
Thank you, TK.
Yes.
Yep.
No problem.
Yep.
Thank you guys.
Thank you for what you do.
Thanks.
Oh,
Yep.
Thank you so much. That means a lot coming from you, sir. You guys have a rest of your evening, and I'll be in touch with you all.
Yep.
Ciao.
Okay.
Bye.
All right.
Great.
Good night.
Good night. All right, everybody. Thank you so much for watching and playing along. That was a phenomenal conversation. Like I said, info at Zambezi Gold, ZAMBEZI gold.com, or D-Ball. They will take care of whatever you need to do as far as getting the ball rolling on some honey purchases and whatnot. And apparently there are some here in America. Like I said, if you got a homebrew club, if you are a commercial meadery, or something like that, reach out, because you never know what they can do for you until you find out. You might think it's out of your reach, and lo and behold, boom! Now you're sitting on a 5-gallon bucket, and you had no idea that was even possible. So help support these guys. They're doing great things over there in Africa, and supplying us with a phenomenal product. As I can say, this is definitely one of the most unique, wildly delicious meads that I've had, or honeys that I've had, and it does make a great mead. So go give that a shot. Next week we will be on, I don't have my calendar in front of me, of course, but I think next week is the start of March, so I can't remember who's on with me next week, but I'll post about it and we'll go from there. Oh no, B&G Meadery, sorry, B&G Meadery out of Oklahoma is with me next week. She's the Cassandra is the first and possibly only Native American female meadery owner in the country, and again possibly in the world. So you want to be here for that. She's going to offer up some really unique insights and into what she's doing and all that stuff. And then next Friday, again on the 8th, we'll be joined with Sarana Meads out of India. They were in the chat earlier. They have some really unique stuff going on, ran by a couple of female doctors over there. So they've got, again, another unique take on mead making. So thank you all so much for your time today. I always appreciate that. Y'all have a wonderful rest of your night, and I'll see y'all next week. Peace.